Tonight, you will sleep.
Welcome, Frodo of the Shire. One who has seen the eye.
This is it, people. Episode 6 is the climax this show's been building up to in the most agonizing, backwoods way imaginable. You would think, since this episode consists entirely of large-scale battles pitifully trying to emulate Peter Jackson's set pieces, that there wouldn't be nearly as many story and character issues as before, right? Surely an episode devoted almost entirely to the action wouldn't be so painful to get through, or necessitate me to pause several times to wonder out loud what the hell is going on, and why are all these characters making the worst possible decisions in every scene? As it turns out, I did, because this episode fails as both a mindless action spectacle and an elaborate fantasy story reaching its supposed climax. You all know the drill by now, so let's get into it. And be prepared to have all your knowledge about how anything in the real world works be subverted. We see that Adar is handling some dirt, proving to the Twitter mobs that he isn't an incel. For a moment, I was afraid we were going to get another painful metaphor about rocks, but it's supposed to be some ritual all elves do before they go into battle. Huh, I don't remember Legolas or any other elf dumping some seeds into the ground before Helm's Deep. He gives a rousing speech to all his orcs and the Dirty Barkeep about how they've been chased across the lands, but now they've come to take this land for themselves. And even though he calls the villagers weak, he still expects some of them will die in order to fulfill their cause. Yeah, I still say it's better than Bronwyn's speech from the last episode, since he has an actual army at his disposal and real leadership skills. But don't take that to mean they're actually competent in a real battle. They march up to the tower doors, only to find the entire place is empty. Anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together can easily see this is a trap, but he still leads all his forces inside anyway. Adar can smell Arondir is close, presumably from spending too much time around people who farm dirt for a living, so he springs into action. It turns out he expected Adar to be stupid enough to lead all his orcs into the keep, and now that they're trapped, he brings down the tower. So one rope and a measly 2x4 were the only things holding up this entire structure? I thought elves were supposed to be master craftsmen, not lazy carpenters who get their supplies from the dumpsters behind Home Depot. Fortunately for Arondir, all of Adar's forces piled into the keep and all signs pointed towards it being abandoned or booby-trapped, so he just has to close the doors and watch them get crushed as a result of their collective stupidity. Well, so much for the Helm's Deep scene, because there's no way all of Adar's forces can survive being bombarded by fiery debris like this. But you see, Adar's a master tactician, because he can predict exactly where every stone's going to fall, and ensure they're all standing in just the right place, so most of them survive. Too bad Arondir and Guild Boss Bronwyn didn't think of setting up oil barrels around the entire outpost, otherwise they could have lit the entire place up and sent them all tumbling down the mountainside to their deaths. In any case, it wasn't the worst plan, and they did manage to evacuate all of the villagers while getting a head start on Adar. Surely the next phase of their plan is to get as far away as they can and hold up somewhere safe, right?
We'll survive that.
How long do we have?
Not long enough. Come on. We have to make ready the village.
Are you kidding me? You left the village in the first place because you knew you couldn't fortify it against the orcs, and now that you have a head start on them, you're going back to an undefended location that they already know where it is? In the immortal words of one of Iron Maiden's best songs, run to the hills! Run for your lives! Why are you so protective of a dirty thatched village? The people of Deadwood weren't as committed to that town, and that place actually had gold. This is the equivalent of Theoden telling his people in the middle of the Helm's Deep siege to run back to Edoras, even though they fled to the fortress because they knew they couldn't defend it against legions of orcs. I'll get more into this later, but just know it gets exponentially dumber from here. We cut to the Numenorians, who've somehow managed to cross the bulk of the ocean in less than a day. A seal droid gets up and attends to his stable sweep duties, giving the audience a clear view of the ship's interior, while also confirming there's no way in hell 100 people, horses, and their supplies can all fit inside it. Maybe they could if this ship had the undercarriage of an iceberg, or was one of the golden galleons from Elric of Melna Benet, but I'm guessing this is just an oversight on the production team's part. He goes topside and wastes a perfectly good apple, only to run straight into warrior Galadriel herself. She wastes no time demonstrating her superiority by saying she's been able to see the coast of Middle-earth for over an hour now, which makes no sense unless her eyes can somehow defy the laws of physics and break the horizon line. We then get this ironic exchange.
What is your rank?
Stable sweep.
Despise not the labor which humbles the heart. Humility has saved entire kingdoms, the proud have all but led to ruin.
You are the very last person who should be lecturing anyone about the virtues of humility, Galadriel.
After all you have endured, it is only natural to feel conflicted.
Conflicted?
Afraid you're short in army.
Leave the army to me. Why are you dodging the question?
Why are you stranded at sea?
Because rather than rest in glory, I chose to seek out the very enemy responsible for your suffering.
It is because of the elves that you were given this island. Surely you can spare a few planks and a rudder.
I will take my chances on the skiff.
It would leave me little choice but to shout for your minders.
Suppose the words never managed to escape your throat. There is a tempest in me. Swept me to this island for a reason. And it will not be quelled by you, Regent.
There are many ways to kill an orc. But for you, I will keep it strong and simple. Stab, twist, gut.
For all of it. I'm sorry.
Your sorrow cannot ease my pain.
Anyway, they get better acquainted, and we learn that Isildur left Numenor because it's no longer what it used to be. This could have been a great opportunity to do some real world building for Numenor that could shed more light on different aspects of its culture and give us deeper insight into Isildur's character, but just like every other time, it gets interrupted when Elendil shows up, who then gives the most roundabout answer behind how his wife died.
It is strange. Most of my life I've looked east to see the sun rise over the sea, sailing into the dawn, and yet to me, it feels like the coming of night. She drowned.
But Elendil,
The sea is always right! The sea is always right!
even when it's drowning people, creating storms, or serving as a half-assed explanation for leaving Isildur, isn't it? It's almost like setting up your entire belief around an unpredictable and chaotic force of nature is incredibly stupid or something. So the Numenorians make landfall, and we're told it's going to take them 2 days to travel up the river and cross the terrain in order to reach the tower. Bear in mind, this intelligence could easily be weeks out of date from their perspective, and it's perfectly reasonable for them to take one look at the ruined tower and think the orcs moved on, since they couldn't possibly know there's a nearby village under attack. Too bad for Rondir and Bronwyn that a couple of hack writers overlooked that little technicality in their script. But don't worry about it, since this entire episode is just meant to rip off the Rohirrim charge into Pelennor Fields. Speaking of rip-offs, Arondir is busy trying to smash Sauron's sword with a hammer, and practically repeats what Elrond said about destroying the ring verbatim. He decides to hide the demonic hilt instead, but doesn't take any precautions to ensure nobody's watching him, which I'm sure won't lead to any contrived plot points later. We then get a montage of the dirt farmers doing their best to spruce up their rundown village, packing orc heads, covering up holes, which I'm sure would totally stop the orcs who dug through houses not too long ago, and setting up archer posts on their roofs. Arondir decides to try his hand in making uninspired speeches.
I have seen smaller armies defeat greater foes. Soon the sun will set. Do your part, and I swear to you, you shall see it rise again. Do you believe it? Do you believe it?
Seriously, Kingdom Hearts is more eloquent than this. They decide to put all of the wounded and children into the tavern to serve as their keep, and I'm just left wondering why they tried so hard to defend this village when all it would take was just a couple of orcs with torches and swords to run through this place, just like the Vikings did at the beginning of the Northmen, and they had far fewer men and resources compared to Adar. None of that matters, however, because we're treated to another forced romance scene that calls back to all the awkwardness and dry delivery of Attack of the Clones, complete with the same seeds.
It is believed that one of the Valar watches over growing things.
The moment I met you, all those years ago, not a day has gone by when I even thought of you. And now that I'm with you again, I'm in agony.
The rest we shall plant after the battle is over. In a new garden, you and I.
The thought of not being with you, I can't breathe.
Together,
Promise me.
If you're suffering as much as I am, please tell me.
I can't. We can't. It's just not possible.
This may be a worse written romance than Rey and Kylo, and at least there they were both schizophrenic loners. But the sun's begun to set under Mark Helm's Deep, and I'm just left thinking, man, those hills off in the distance look like a much better place to defend yourselves than this creaky old village, and you would have been better off abandoning it altogether. Night falls, and the orcs advance, accompanied by low string instruments that used to be scary at one point, but have now become overplayed and cliche given how often they appear in horror movies. Bronwyn's trying to ignite their trap, but isn't having much luck. Keep all of her actions in mind, because towards the end of this battle, I guarantee many others will be calling bullshit like I was. Her incompetence gets her friend killed, but she scores another lucky shot and uses the dead orc's torch to send a burning wagon towards them. Honestly, I have to agree with that orc, because this barely did anything to thin their numbers, and wouldn't have done that much damage even if they were all in its way. This entire plan depended on them being funneled into the village on this one bridge, but as you're about to see, their pathetic barricades don't do anything to stop the orcs from pouring into the village on all angles. But now they've trapped the orcs between these two burning wagons, and the battle has officially begun. Arrows are flying in all directions, almost nonchalantly given how fast they pull back the bowstrings. It looks like the orcs may be done for, but one of them just kicks down the barricade, and they all pour into the village regardless. So, I guess that plan was a bust.
They're headed for the tavern!
What reason would they have to make for the tavern instead of going after the people shooting at them? They couldn't possibly know anyone's inside unless they overheard the villagers' plan to use it as their keep. Or they just read the script and instantly knew that's where they had to go to generate the most drama. Arondir does his best to hold them off from the roof until one orc does something I still can't wrap my head around. Was lighting a building on fire or simply shooting him not an option for this orc? It seems like his entire plan was to pull them both off the roof and ensure he got killed, just to bring him to the ground. Oh, but I see now his plan was to ensure Arondir has a boss fight with this big orc, who I'm sure could easily crush his skull with his bare hands, but he does the cliche big brute shtick by tossing him into every wall around him. I would be amazed that all of Arondir's bones aren't crushed, considering his opponent's size compared to his wispy frame, but this is a cliche tactic used by Terminators against characters with plot armor. What are you even doing here? You're not stabbing him. You're not choking him. It looks like you did this just so you could have a piggyback ride. You know, it's pretty strange how this brute doesn't have any weapons at all, because I'm pretty sure if he just had a sword, he could easily cleave through Arondir and all the villages by himself. It's not like these other soldiers are putting up that much of a fight, not even against this old lady, but I'll get into that in a little bit. Hey big guy, just bash his head against the well repeatedly. I'm pretty sure that's going to kill him faster than choking him. Of course, he doesn't do that, so Arondir has the chance to stab him in the eye in a vain attempt to make this scene a little more intense. Maybe it could have been if I was the least bit invested in Arondir's character, but I haven't been ever since his introduction in episode 1. All I know about him is that he likes seeds, he's in love with Bronwyn, and he isn't a very good judge of character, which will become much more apparent later on. I know many people consider Legolas to be a thin character too, but he had more going on than just being a bland Gary stew like Arondir.
I would cut off your head, dwarf, if it stood but a little higher from the ground.
You would die before your stroke fell.
It also helps that he had Gimli to banter with, in order to flush out certain aspects of his personality through their friendly rivalry and eventual friendship, whereas Arondir just has his bland love interest and annoying kid sidekick to talk to. Anyway, he gets saved by his beloved girl boss Bronwyn, and possibly contracted orc AIDS considering all of that blood went straight into his mouth. The battle seems to have been won, and now they're celebrating because they've barely lost any people. Or did they?
We're fighting our own.
Are you really that surprised? You saw them all leave to go serve Adar, so of course he's going to put them to use. I'm just wondering why he didn't send them in without any helmets to disincentivize the villagers from fighting back at full force. Hell, surely all of them weren't willing to butcher their neighbors, so Adar could have taken them to the front lines and have them publicly executed as a way to horrify Avandir's forces and destroy their morale. It's a tactic that we've seen work before. But that would have made Adar too villainous, and the writers couldn't have that given what's going to happen later on in this episode. So the real attack begins with a volley of arrows, killing several people I didn't know the names of, so don't really care about, and wound Bronwyn, who would absolutely be dead from the blood loss alone. Again with the slow-mo, this is meant to be a tense scene of our heroes trying to escape the villains as fast as they can. It doesn't make this scene any more impactful and only drags down the pace, but I could say that for pretty much everything in this entire show. So they rush to the bar, which they also refer to as the keep in case we forgot, and barricade the doors. You would think the orcs would immediately rush here, but they've effectively been put on pause, so we could have this gripping scene of Avandir and Theo trying to help Bronwyn. They cauterize her wound and act like that's somehow going to make up for all her blood loss and the countless germs circulating this dirty place. Bait that she might be dead even though no one's taken her pulse, but she wakes up just fine. Man, Boromir must be pissed no one thought to use magic seeds on him. The writers press play and the orcs burst inside, taking everyone prisoner before Adar himself steps in. Avandir tries to barter with the villagers' lives for the knife, but thankfully, Adar isn't stupid enough of a villain to not take advantage of his position, so he starts killing the villagers at random. They're about to kill Bronwyn too until Theo gives up the ghost and reveals he knew where Avandir hid the knife because, like I said, he didn't take care to ensure nobody saw him with it. He gives it to the dirty barkeep to perform a special task for him, and that's when the Numenorians charge in, somehow reaching the village in a single day when they said it would take 2, but who cares because they're ripping off the Rohirrim charge into Pelennor fields. Who cares about logical consistency or good storytelling when you can just do cheap fan service instead? After all, that's the J.J. Abrams method. So they fight, and the Numenorians do the ridiculous chain move we saw in the trailer. Isildur's friend looks like he'll be in trouble, but he gets saved, because the orc thought if he kept hitting the sword in the same place, he'll eventually kill him. But now we see warrior Galadriel live up to her name as Scourge of the Orcs, with this ridiculous move. Yes, I'm well aware Legolas gave physics-defying stunts in the past, but those moves were at least practical, whereas this could easily have backfired if the orc just got out of the way, or she ran into somebody. I'm not even sure how she's holding onto this horse from this position. But whatever, you know the drill. Tarmiriel sends Isildur to join the fight, fulfilling her only contribution to this entire scene. Elendil looks like he may be in trouble, but totally not Sauron saves him. Man, that's going to be ironic later, and also makes Isildur's inclusion in this battle completely pointless. Galadriel and Avandir finally meet, but it's just to point out to her that Adar's getting away, and then we get this cringe-worthy scene.
Who is that?
Commander of the Northern Armies, Galadriel.
Why don't you two just throw her a parade while you're at it? Can anyone else say Mary Sue? Because I don't think the point has been hammered home hard enough yet. The chase is on, and Galadriel makes another cheap reference to Lord of the Rings by whispering the same thing Olwen did to her horse to make it go faster. It turns out it didn't matter anyway because Totally Not Sauron teleported in front of them and knocks Adar down.
You remember me?
No.
I'm surprised you couldn't tell, Adar, because it's been so obvious across every scene.
Stop! We need him alive. I need him alive.
You don't know what he did.
One cannot satisfy thirst by drinking seawater.
It was stupid when you said that in episode 4, and it's still stupid here. Also, keep in mind Galadriel's the one who wanted to keep him alive. I imagine all of the Numenorians must be underwhelmed because they were promised a war, and it turned out all they had to do was just cut down a couple orcs. Isildur and his lieutenant friend are all for joining the company Galadriel was forming to hunt them down, but his other friend wimps out, which I'm sure the army will be totally okay with. We cut to Galadriel interrogating Adar, and we finally learn the truth about what he really is.
The Moriondor, the sons of the dark. The first orcs.
Uruk. We prefer Uruk.
Whoa, careful though, Galadriel. You don't want him to cancel you on Twitter, do you? She demands to know where Sauron is, which causes him to laugh. That sparks our supposed hero to say this to him.
Perhaps we should bring our prisoners into the sunlight.
I'm surprised you even took prisoners given how bloodthirsty you are, but ensuring they all receive agonizing deaths just to spite Adar? Can someone show me who was meant to be the noble warrior here? Anyway, he tells her that Sauron was doing experiments to create a new kind of power beyond flesh, and turned against him because he couldn't stand watching so many of his children being butchered for the cause.
I killed Sauron.
I do not believe you.
You cannot believe an Uruk could do that, which your entire army could not.
You know, I think I'm starting to warm up to Adar. Anyone who calls out how inept and terrible of a person Galadriel is okay in my book. We then get this line from the character who's meant to be a virtuous hero in this scene.
You will be kept alive, so that one day I will whisper in your piked ear that all your offspring are dead.
Shepherd, you have become an annoyance. You fight against inevitability, dust struggling against cosmic winds. Know this as you die in vain. Your time will come. Your species will fall.
It would seem I'm not the only elf alive being transformed by darkness.
I gotta say, Adar's making a lot of sense here. Maybe the real twist of Rings of Power is that she's Sauron all along. It would explain how sociopathic and twisted she is. She decides, screw it, I said, I'm just gonna kill you because you're annoying me. But totally not Sauron stops her. I thought all these Dutch angles were unnecessary and obnoxious, but it turns out they highlight how much more insane she is compared to Adar. We then get a scene I'm sure the shills are going to argue is character development, but it only serves to highlight how unstable and crazy they both are.
Thank you for pulling me back.
As you pulled me back first.
Whatever it was he did to you, and whatever it was you did, be free of it.
They're really doing it. Rings of Power is honestly trying to ship Galadriel and Sauron together. There definitely has to be rotisserie spit in Tolkien's grave, because this really is sick. She really is going to be responsible for him becoming the Dark Lord who tries to conquer Middle-earth, since he wanted to live a life of peace before he met her, and now he's got the taste for blood again. Weren't all these villagers struggling to find food in just the last episode? And yet here they are swilling drinks like it's the 4th of July. Are we supposed to believe the Númenóreans brought an entire distillery with them in this military campaign? Honestly, why do I even bother at this point? It's not like these writers have ever given two shits about continuity in any other scene. Talmiriel congratulates Bronwyn for being such a good leader, despite the fact she did next to nothing in that entire fight, and nearly screwed the whole thing up at the beginning. Seriously, I'm not a fan of Arondir, but he should be the one getting congratulated by the queen. Whatever, doesn't matter because Totally Not Sauron shows up with his crest, and that's somehow proof for all of them to bow down and call him the king of the Southlands. At least Aragorn had Underwill and a legion of ghosts to prove his noble heritage, but that's all it takes for these people to call him their king. Arondir then decides to give the dangerous artifacts they've been fighting so hard to defend to the kid who just admitted he's addicted to its power. But, as it turns out, nobody thought to look inside the parcel and realize the dagger was replaced with an axe. I guess everyone from Galadriel to Bronwyn to Arondir couldn't tell through the cloth. No, as it turns out, the dirty barkeep took the blade up to the tower's ruins and stuck it into the stone to serve as a literal key. God damn it, it's the Wayfinder of the Death Star ruins all over again. But now we get to see Adar's plan for ourselves. It turns out this terrible key that's meant to bind these lands to Sauron forever just unlocks a dam of water, and the orcs dug all these tunnels to ensure it was carried to the heart of the mountain. Never mind what would have happened if the water fell into a sinkhole or the tunnels collapsed because of the cascading pressure, because all of this was meant to cause Mount Doom to erupt, and in turn, transforming the Southlands into the plains of Udun we saw in Lord of the Rings proper. I'm sure it's well established at this point that none of this ever happened in the lore, and they're pulling all of it straight out of their asses. The episode ends with everyone trying to run in vain, while Galadriel walks towards the pyroclastic cloud and gets swallowed whole. This absolutely would have killed her, as the people of Pompeii can attest to, But, as we saw in the trailers, she's just going to be covered in Cheeto dust in the next episode, because these writers believe all of us are just as stupid and misinformed as they are. I'd say this episode's another 1 out of 10, between the bad action, poor direction, schizophrenic editing, how incompetent and thoroughly deplorable the characters we're meant to root for are, and the sheer idiocy of every battle strategy these characters used. I was tempted to give this a 1.5 because Elendil and Isildur had something close to a decent bonding moment at the very end, but it was poorly developed and wasn't even that well acted compared to the two Durins, so nope, this episode's still a 1. Jeff Bezos wanted Rings of Power to be his Game of Thrones, and it turns out he got his wish, because this episode was just as sloppy, inane, and disrespectful to the world it's supposed to be attached to as all of Game of Thrones Season 8. We're close to the end of the first season, and I have no idea where this story can even go from here, because all of it is so directionless, stupid, and degrading to the world it's meant to be attached to. The only people I can see who'd even bother tuning into Season 2 are the masochists like me, reviewing this terrible show to see how bad it'll get, and warn others to ensure they stay far away from it. At the very least, I can at least pretend Warrior Galadriel's dead until she pops up in the next episode, and if you're still willing to follow me into this colossal shit show, then stay tuned. I promise I'll try to do more positive content when this season's over, and thankfully, that's not too far off.